I'm Tony Curcio with Iron Woman Construction Environmental Services, and we're a sponsor here. And as mentioned earlier, we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years now, and just means so much for the opportunity to be able to sponsor your fantastic work. I'm an environmental engineer, and I work in BD and pre-construction over at Iron Woman Construction. This really aligns closely with our values and the work that you do. We have a corporate social responsibility program that focuses on clean water, housing equity, and education. So this is all right in alignment. And we have a foundation that focuses specifically on clean water. So our work and your work is a great combination. And again, we really appreciate the opportunity to be able to come here and sponsor this today. I'm also here to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, second keynote speaker, Sergio Campos. He's a chief of Water and Sanitation Division of the Inter-American Development Bank. IADB, founded in 1959, to provide long-term financing, economic, social, and institutional development in Latin America and the Caribbean, partnering with 48 member countries to provide cutting-edge research about relevant development issues, policy impact to inform decisions, and technical assistance. Their mission is about focusing on reducing poverty and inequality. So, Sergio specifically is an economist with expertise in business administration and public policy. He has worked on infrastructure financing, re-engineering, and the financial analysis of various water and sewage companies in Latin America, as well as structuring public-private partnerships. And so with that, let's welcome our second keynote speaker, Sergio Campos.
Thank you, Tony. And everyone, if you could put any questions in the chat, I'll get those to Sergio at the end of his talk.
Good morning and greetings from Washington, D.C. It's an honor for me and representing the Inter-American Development Bank to participate in this event. And I'd like to start by congratulating all the previous speakers for the amazing work that are doing in WASH. It's really hopeful, and it's really wonderful to see that professionals and other organizations are working towards providing safe water and sanitation to the people that don't have it. I'm going to start my presentation. Let me see when you see the screen. Let me know when you see the screen.
You're good. Okay, we're in.
Okay. I'm going to present the sector challenges for water and sanitation in Latin America and the Caribbean. As many of you have mentioned, SDG 6, Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is the part of the global agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals. Water is essential, not only for water consumption, but also for health. If people don't have access to potable water or to sanitation, most likely they are going to get sick. If they get sick, their level of education, particularly their children, it's affected. And there's scientific evidence that traces the link between not having access to adequate water and sanitation to health problems and to education. It's also highly important to gender, as many of the previous speaker mentions. The main responsible for providing water for homes in most of the work are women and children. So if we want to improve health, education, and gender, water and sanitation, it's an important aspect to be considered. And also, if we want to reduce poverty, if you don't have access to basic water and sanitation, basic services, water and sanitation, you're mostly deemed poor. For Latin America, water is important. Water security is critical. It's critical not only for our economy, but also for the well-being of our population. Latin America has 1/3 of the freshwater resources of the world, is the richest area in terms of fresh water. Our economy highly depends on that. Our exports, such as beef, soy, flowers, fruits, even mining, depends on abundant sources of water and reliable sources of water. And almost 70% of our electricity comes from hydropower generation. That gives us an idea of how important water is for our economy. But this amount of water is not distributed evenly in Latin America. There are parts in Latin America, like the Amazon in Brazil, where it rains 22,000 cubic meters per year per person. And within the same Brazil, in the northeast part, it only rains 1,500 cubic meters per person per year, 14 to 15 times less. That example for Brazil is the same in Mexico, between the northern part in Mexico and the southern part, or in Peru in the coastal zone versus the Amazon part that is part of Peru, as well as in Paraguay between the Chaco Paraguayo and the southern part of Paraguay. So despite the fact that Latin America has an abundant sources of fresh water, this water is not distributed, and there are some areas in which it's very scarce. In fact, 39% of our land lives under water scarcity. But not only water is not even distributed, but drought, as the drought that we have seen in the United States that affected California, and hurricanes like the ones that we have seen affecting in the United States have also been devastating for Latin America. This is a picture of La Ciudad de La Plata in Argentina. This is 2014, and we can see the impact and the effect of climate change in the population, not only in our agriculture, not only in our mining. And I'm sure you're also familiar with the drought that affected Sao Paulo, a city of 22 million people, were very close to not have potable water or water to wash dishes, hygiene, or to flush the toilets. And as you are also probably aware, the Intergovernmental Panel released a report in which states that some of the effects of climate change are already irreversible. So droughts and floods are going to be more intense, more frequent, and are going to be more a part of our reality. So within the last 2 years, we have seen in Latin America droughts and floods affecting not only the water and service provision, but also cuts in electricity, and in some cases, the increase or hikes in the prices of goods and services. And that urbanization, it's not going to stay there. Our research indicates that in Latin America, there are more than 140 fast-growing cities that are growing rates higher than the mega cities like the Mexico City, Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo, Lima, or Bogota, and that at that rate, the population will more than double in 20 years. So addressing water resources from a holistic point of view, it's very important, not only for the water security and on the economy of Latin America, but also for the well-being of our population. And when we looked at projections of water scarcity in this map, the brownest area is the areas in the world that are facing most water scarcity. That's a 2005 picture, and then when we project it to 2025, to 2050, and to 2095, what we can see is that water availability in Latin America, it's not going to be as much problematic as some of the most populated areas of the world, which are going to face important water scarcity. So Latin America has the potential of being a region solidarity. Solidarity to the world in terms of sharing our products that derive from water. But in order to do that, we need to have a holistic approach and understanding better the nexus between water, energy, and food. Let me go now into water and sanitation and access to water and sanitation. Latin America made a great progress over the last 25 years. We provided water and sanitation to more than 220 million people. Latin America has been the leading region in terms of achieving the Millennium Development Goals. But for us, it's an insufficient progress. For the Inter-American Development Bank, it's an insufficient progress. This picture reminds that has two women, two generations apart. Is the 24-25 progress report from the Joint Monitoring Program that tracked compliance with the Millennium Development Goals, and includes these two women to remind us the importance of addressing water and sanitation for gender issues. These are two women, 3 generations apart, and hopefully that's a story that needs to be changed. And the sustainable goals are meant and have been structured to do that. Today we have goal number 6, SDG 6, that talks about universal access to water and sanitation, but also environmental protection, environmental sustainability and protection as well. When we look at the Sustainable Development Goals and we compare them with the Millennium Development Goals, in water, in the Millennium Development Goals, we're talking about access to secure water. And then our coverage was about 95%. But when we talk about drinkable water, the level of coverage in Latin America drops down to 65. That is that approximately 200 million people, we don't know whether they have, that they don't have drinkable water. And when we go to sanitation, access to adequate sanitation was considered to be 83. If we talk about adequate slash management, which is adequate management of this CREDAS, our coverage drops to 22. So that gives you an idea of how big the gap and the importance to address the access is. Again, more than 220 million people in Latin America, that's more than 1/3, lacks of safely managed drinking water. More than 490 lack access to adequate slash management. And 19 million people are still practicing open defecation. When we compare the rural sector with the urban sector, there's also obviously an important difference. Coincidentally enough, the level of coverage in the rural area is almost the exact coverage that the urban area had 25 years ago. So we can assume that there's a 25-year gap in development between the urban and the rural area, and important aspects to address in terms of the urban area. And when we compare the richest population with the poorest population, despite the fact that the gaps have been decreased, in the case of Bolivia from 84 and 38, 25 years ago to 95 and 56, the gap has been bridged, but as you can see in most countries, it's still highly visible, reflecting an important issue to be addressed. And when we look at wastewater treatment, while most of developed countries are treating 60% of the wastewater that they generate, Latin America is only treating approximately 18%. What are the challenges for our region to embrace the circular economy, to reuse water in water stress areas, to try to use water for agriculture, to make better use of the slash that we generate from wastewater management. If we want to tackle the issues of climate change, our infrastructure need to be more resilient. That's an invitation not to have a complete shift in infrastructure from gray infrastructure to green infrastructure, but perhaps find the right balance between gray and green infrastructure. Latin America has a lot of an important assets, environmental and assets that can be used. Financing, of course, it's an important gap. If we want to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, the level of investment that Latin America is making needs to increase. We estimate that Latin America needs to invest for the next 15 years, $20 billion per year. And right now we're investing approximately 8 billion per year. So the financing needs to be doubled. We're investing less than 0.34% of the GDP. That's probably one of the reasons why the water that is lost in the networks that are outdated and needs to be refurbished, it's more than 50%. That means that more than 50% of the water, the potable water that we produce, is lost because of network malfunction. And as indicated before, if we continue investing the way we were investing, we would reach the Millennium Development Goals by 2041 and the Sustainable Development Goals in 2107. That's almost 100 years. We know that in water and sanitation or WASH for Latin America, it's not everything infrastructure, not everything needs to be in the city. There are important tasks to address in terms of improving our institutions, improving our legal framework, as well as training better our people, our professionals. In order to address the challenges that I mentioned before at the Inter-American Development Bank, we have a sector framework that indicates that we ought to work in 5 areas. The first one is access, reducing inequalities to the poor, to the rural, to the peri-urban areas, to informal settlements, increasing wastewater coverage. The wastewater treatment is about 20%, more than 490 million people, lack of adequate sludge management. So those ought to be important or priorities for the sector. Financing, as mentioned before, $20 million that would need to be invested every year. We're investing half of that. We need to increase that. But not only that, we need to face equity and tariff and cost recovery and subsidies for people that cannot afford access to or paying tariffs for water and sanitation. Tariffs are going to ensure that the infrastructure that we have is sustainable. Governance as well. Most of the public utilities are publicly owned. Practices or good practices of corporate governance need to be implemented, strengthening our ministries and our regulatory bodies as well. Strengthen the autonomy of public utilities. This is an invitation for innovation. Our utilities, the WASH sector in general worldwide, has been somewhat reluctant to innovate. It's probably linked to the fact that water needs to be potable. There's no an in-between there. So innovation implies taking risks. The WASH sector has been somewhat reluctant to take risks. And last but not least, of course, promoting water security. Water doesn't come from the faucets. Water comes from the environment. The environment is affected or it's linked to climate change. We need to protect our environment and work on gender with ethnic minorities, which are the ones that have less access to water, and always try to work in a multi-sectoral way and always trying to work in a comprehensive way. The COVID pandemic took us by surprise and unprepared. Hand washing has been the #1 recommendation to fight COVID. Yet not everybody in Latin America had access to safe water and sanitation. Water has been deemed an essential service while we were telling everybody to stay home and practice social distance. To the workers that provide water and sanitation, we told them, please come to work. People need to have a service of good quality. And what we ended up finding out is that they didn't have plans of rapid response to connect the informal settlements. Some of the employees did not have PPE or security protocols to go to work. So we had, as a bank, we provide some support and the sector had to find ways to address these problems. As a result of the pandemic, consumption increased by 20%. Solidarity measures affected the bottom line of the public utilities. The public utilities were mandated to provide water to informal settlements. That meant increasing costs. Solidarity measures meant to reduce costs, to reduce income, increasing consumption, increased costs. Therefore, some of the utilities increased their financial deficits. And this picture is a woman in Brazil. It's a picture that illustrates that you can probably have alcohol and a mask to fight the pandemic, but if you don't have access to water and sanitation, and if your infrastructure is not resilient to the effect of climate change, it is a situation very vulnerable. So COVID has highlighted in bold what climate change has been telling us for quite some time. We need to provide safe access to water and sanitation to the population that don't have it today. Let me now talk about the IDB, our loan portfolio, our technical cooperation support, and our sector initiatives. The IDB is the major lender for water and sanitation in Latin America. We have an $8 billion portfolio only in water and sanitation, 89 projects in pretty much every single country of the 26 recipient members, beneficiary members of the Inter-American Development Bank. Most of our portfolio is satisfactory. There are some projects that are in alert, mostly due to the effects of climate change and then to the effect of COVID that have somehow prevented that some of the infrastructure, some of the works and the infrastructure is built. We also have a technical cooperation fund, which is a multi-donor fund in which the government of Switzerland, the government of Spain, and the government of Austria have contributed, as well as PepsiCo Foundation, which is our private partner within the ACO Fund. The ACO Fund was created in 2008. Donors joined in 2009. It's the main vehicle through which we support technical cooperation. These are grants to countries for pilot projects, for feasibility studies, for client support, for operational support. The bank has allocated 75 million. Donors have contributed with 40 million. And we provide support from technical cooperation to almost every single country that is part of the bank. Some of our main initiatives, just after so many numbers and so many percentages, this addresses the need to improve the quality of the services. According to the Millennium Development Goals, people using these latrines would be considered to have access to sanitation. According to the Sustainable Development Goals, no. But this is an example of how the quality of the infrastructure needs to be improved. If these two girls are considered, according to the Millennium Development Goals, they were considered to have access to water. According to SDGs, probably not. This highlights also the importance of addressing the quality of our water resources. And this one, the complexity of the infrastructure that we need to build. Providing sanitation to informal settlements that have been built or that have been built over the last 20 years. It's very challenging. We need non-conventional technologies to address this problem. And this also highlights the impact to lack of access to sanitation to our environment. One of the initiatives that we have to address these problems is optimal sanitation. Optimal sanitation wants to provide an incentive to focus first in people and then in the environment. When we think of the infrastructure for sanitation, the first thing that we build are the pipes. The second thing, the wastewater treatment plants, and finally connecting to households or to the people. We need to reverse the solutions. We need to first address the problem for the households, then go to the pipes, and then go to the wastewater treatment plants. All of those things need to be done. We're hoping to explore different mechanisms, innovation to address the problem from a different perspective, so that people are benefited first, the environment is benefited first. Innovation, that's why the fourth pillar of this initiative is innovation, and that will require a lot of changes in governance. We have commitment of 18 countries already to embrace this initiative and to move forward with this one. As mentioned before, innovation is key. If we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, the $20 billion per year that need to be invested every year, and the type of infrastructure that needs to be developed, unless we innovate, we're not going to be able to address the problem in a shorter period of time and with less resources. What innovation does is teaching us to do things differently, teaching us to do things faster, and teaching us to do at a lower cost. So that's why we're creating an innovation facility with the support of the government of Spain, Switzerland, Israel, Korea, Japan, and we're creating and resources from the bank. We're hoping to set up the innovation facility to start in the range of $10 million to mainstream and to send a signal to the region and to the public utilities that they ought to innovate. Only 10% of the utilities have an innovation department. Only 2% of them have innovation plans. That's a gap, and that's a bridge that needs to be bridged. The sooner, the better. The fourth one is hydrobid. We are using satellite information from NASA to map water availability in more than 280,000 basins. This is information that is very important to make decisions of where are we allocating the energy plants, where should we allocate the wastewater treatment plants, how is the water flowing, in what volumes is flowing, how is the dry season versus the non-dry season affecting our environment. This is this type of information. Before big data and before technology didn't exist, it was hard to construct, it was hard to build. Nowadays, the technology, we can have it 100. Another initiative that we have with the Nature Conservancy and FEMSA Foundation and many other partners, of course, is the Water Funds. Water Funds is it's an initiative that unlocks financing to address the problems of the different basins. Every basin is an ecosystem that in which coexist the industry, rural communities. It's the water that serves for water and sanitation for cities. The approach needs to be holistic, needs to be scientific. So through the water funds, what we try to build is consensus between private, public, the community in order to promote nature-based solutions and water security for our basins. We have more than 25 water funds created, 14 in creation, committed 27 millions, and are doing a lot of work in this aspect as well. Another initiative that we have are transboundary waters. 71% of the fresh water that Latin America has is surface water in transboundary areas. That amount of water covers 60% of our land, where 40% of population lives. The Amazon alone is 40% of the fresh water that we have, and the amount of transboundary water basins in South America is 38, and in Central America being so small as 29 transboundary waters. Yet for transboundary waters, we don't have adequate legal frameworks. We don't have the same hydrological data so that countries can address the problems with common data. Our legal frameworks are not so solid, and our institutionally is very weak. So that's why we have this initiative in order to enhance those four aspects. Then we also developed Aqua Rating, which is a tool that evaluates the performance of water utilities. It evaluates the performance of them in 8 areas. But the most interesting aspect of this initiative is that we're not only evaluating their performance-based indicator, but based in practices. We mapped more than 380 practices in utilities. How do they micrometer? How do they connect to their customers? What protocols of security do they use? Are they using? How often do they replace their meters? How do they relate to their employees? What practices of planning do they have? And so on and so forth. So when Aqua Rating is implemented, the public utility manager and the public utility managing staff, they not only know where they are, but what actions need to be taken in order to improve their performance. Then we have Lazos de Agua. This is an initiative that tackles access to the rural sector. This initiative focuses on access, something that we know how to do. Behavioral exchange through the social arts in order to ensure that access does not equate to adequate use. Sometimes we build in the rural sector great infrastructure, but it's not used well. And one of the reasons also this infrastructure is not sustained is because there's not a capital component that enables to foster the development of rural economies. So through this initiative in which we partnered with the Cirque du Soleil, FEMSA Foundation and Coca-Cola, we're piloting behavioral change through the social art in order to complement the access and the capital. We also have initiatives in recycling, in which we promote the use of the reduce, reuse, refuse, and recycle in Latin America. This is an initiative in which we dialogue specifically with the recyclers, waste pickers. Solid waste is becoming an increasing problem to our rivers and to our lakes. So it's an issue that also we're working with partners like PepsiCo Foundation, Coca-Cola, Fundación Avina, and many other partners. We also have an initiative that is zero waste. Almost 30% of the food that we buy is wasted. So that's why it's hashtag without zero waste, basically. In this initiative, we work with knowledge, also behavior, innovation, and strengthening policy. And finally, what do we do in terms of regional policy dialogue? We bring a lot of partners to Focus of the Americas in Stockholm, where is hosted the World Water Week every year. The bank has an important presence and a relevant presence. We go there to learn what other regions in the world are doing, but also to share what the region is doing in terms of bridging the access to water and sanitation gap. We also led the regional development process of the World Water Forum. It's a forum that is carried every 4 years. The last one was in Brasilia, focusing climate, people development, urban ecosystems, and had three cross-cutting issues: sharing, capacity, and governance. We also are supporting the development of Latino San, which is it's a forum and that takes place every 4 years. Last one was in Costa Rica. We participated and we brought all the governments together and all the institutions to showcase what it's been done. Next one is going to be in Bolivia. And we also partnered with the International Water Association so that Latin America also has an outreach with other partners in other parts of the world in order to bring technology. And that's pretty much it, the content of the presentation. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, can you stop sharing your screen, please, Sergio?
Yes, hold on. Just give me just 1 minute.
So I do have a couple of questions that popped up in the chat. I want to first read Stu Martin's comments. Sergio, I love the innovation and collaboration you are building with BID. Kudos. One damper or resistance to innovation is culture and status quo, the way things are. I sometimes find people are unwilling to change, very slow, and this halts innovation. How are social service agencies, churches, or community thought leaders helping people make the change?
Great question, especially because of the role that innovation needs to be placed in order to bridge the gap. Innovation needs to be not only digital or technological. Innovation needs to be social, needs to be in governance, needs to be in financing. And within the social, I think that partnering with advocacy groups and NGOs is going to be key. People are going to have access to water and sanitation, or are going to improve the access to water and sanitation, not only by having the pipes ready, having the pipes laid down and built, it's important, but they also need to make a rational use of the infrastructure. They also have to do to make an adequate use of that. No? So in the initiative that we're building, we're not only going to be focusing on digitalization or digital or technology, but also in social and governance and in finance. No? One example of that is microfinance, for example. We have a pilot with water.org in which we have supported the creation in banks of resources that can help families to improve their facilities, their bathrooms, their kitchens, so that they can improve their quality of services and so on and so forth. So that's an innovation, a social innovation, a financial innovation that complements the technical innovation.
Thank you. Another question, a follow-up was from Stu, and he's been working, and as you've heard, the E-Club is, he's wanting to know what platform or system you're using to map the water systems. So we're using, for instance, ImWater, as you may have heard earlier.
We developed Hydrobit, that's our platform.
Okay.
And then if I can have the contact, I can put them in contact with our technical experts. The two other platforms that we use, they're in the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember. The Water Unlock is one, and there's another one that we use. But it's information from it's information that is produced by NASA, basically.
Okay, well, and yeah, if you could send those contacts to Steve or someone in the group, and we'll make sure that the folks get them.
Super, yes.
I think we have a couple of questions for from the in-person audience. Charlotte or Emily?
Yarrow, do we have any questions from the main room?
Not so far.
Okay.
We do have one. I'm going to get Steve.
Steve has texted me his question. So even though he's there in person, he says, my question for Sergio, in discussions with colleagues at other development banks or just personal knowledge, please compare and contrast wash needs that IADB faces with what other banks face.
Interesting questions. I always in rural water and in wash in particular, we always talk about lessons learned. I always say that it's lessons that we haven't learned, because when you compare the access to water with electricity and with the telecommunications in 1970, sorry, they were all at the same place. And when you compare them today in terms of telecommunication, connectivity is pretty much universal. Electricity is borderline in universal access, but in wash, we're very far down. And it's not only one region, it's Latin America, it's Asia, it's Africa, and many other places, no? So the approaches from the other banks are similar. I mean, I think that we all have consensus that access needs to be tackled from not only from the engineering point of view, but from the financial, from the governance, from the innovation, and from the water security. The difference that the main difference that we see is that in Africa, there's more rural than in Latin America. Latin America is almost 85%, 90% peri-urban or urban. So that's one of the areas in which there's a difference. And with Asia, I think they are in between. They are a large urban population, but they also have an important part of rural population. So those would be. So I think that for all institutions, the approach needs to be multi-sectoral and needs to be integral. The difference is the geography in which we developed our solutions. Also, it varies depending on the latitude in which you're talking about. Right? If it's in a dry area or in a non-dry area, the approach are also different.
Thank you. I've got one here from Lakewood Foothills Rotary. Does IDB focus on larger central water treatment systems distributing clean water, or do you focus on distributing water as is and then having small personal or neighborhood filtering systems?
We do both, depending on the solution that every municipality has, no?
Okay, yeah, it just depends on the assessment and the situation at hand.
Exactly.
I think Chris Roselle has a question, and Chris, please be brief. We've only got a couple minutes, and I have a couple more questions.
Mil gracias, Sergio.
Un placer.
Sergio, it's clear that the urban areas have better water and sanitation services. It's clear that urban areas are not environmentally sustainable. Does the bank have a policy to make it so there is not an incentive to move from rural areas to urban areas, which already is a major problem in the Americas?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chris, and congratulations on the amazing job that you presented that you're doing in the rural area in I think it was in Africa, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the solutions that you presented are very similar to some of the solutions. No, some of the solutions that you have in the pictures are very similar to some of the solutions that we are bringing in Latin America too. The bank's contribution to the financing sector in Latin America is the largest, as I mentioned. We're the largest bank providing loans to water and sanitation, but by not a stretch, we probably contribute with 5% or 1% of the financing that the region implements. No? So in the projects that we finance, we are required and mandated to have water and a solution and a sanitation for sanitation. Sanitation and wastewater treatment. So when we do a project, we ensure that water is sort of not only potable water, but also sanitation and wastewater treatment, that the project includes both, in order to address the sustainability of the environment. Not all the infrastructure that is being built is built with that type of policy, and that's why we see what we see. And then one of the strategies to prevent migration from the rural areas to the urban areas is to potentiate or to empower more the rural areas, but not only with water, with sanitation, with health, with education, schools, hospitals, health centers, and so on and so forth. No? One of the reasons why people are migrating is because within the rural environment, they don't have access to those basic services.
Okay, we've got time for one more. And Lee Hollingsworth, you mentioned a $12 billion shortfall and in your presentation. And he would like to know where we might get that money.
I think that water and sanitation only gets 5% of the climate financing money available that it's out there, according to our sources. So I think that the water sector, one needs to make sure that some of the climate resources that are out there at the Green Climate Fund or the other funds and the private sector and the social impact sector can be allocated to water. That's one factor. The second one is we need to revisit the technological solutions and the type of infrastructure that we build. Conventional solutions are not going to help us address the problem. And third, through innovation, it's proven that we can do things better and faster. Just as one example, in the past, we used to replace pipes on the ground by opening trenches, moving earth and dirt, affecting the traffic and the well-being of some of our neighbors. Today, you don't have to do that. There are technologies, that's trenchless technologies, pipe bursting, pipe jacking, that can be used. They're least expensive. They can do the job in a faster. No? So I think that those are the approaches. Then private sector participation. I think that if we are able to address the legal framework and provide the right incentives, I think that the private sector, the same way the private sector bridge the financial gap in electricity and in telecom, and if we provide the right sector framework, I think that resources are going to flow from that end too. I think that it's a four-pronged approach.
Thank you, Sergio.